In this video I will show you the most important tools to get you started on editing videos for YouTube in DaVinci Resolve. I will also give you advice that will help you to build your personal workflow and how to utilize different pages in Resolve. When you launch DaVinci Resolve, you will get this screen where you will see your latest projects. Just create a new one and give it a name so that you will be able to recognize what your project was about. First thing you will want to do is to set up your desired resolution and frame rate for your project, since everything you create will reference your project settings, and changing it later can cause problems like having to adjust all your previous work. In the media pool page you have a good workspace to manage your footage. Here you have your file browser where you can navigate through directories of your PC. If you have a folder you frequently visit, you can right click here and add a new bookmark, which will also be present in other projects. You basically just drag and drop your footage into this space at the bottom. You of course also can drag and drop them from your file explorer. By right clicking you can also create a new bin, which works like a folder. In case you work with image sequences, you have to make sure that this setting, which is accessible over this icon, is set to sequence. In this case also make sure you right click it and set it to the right frame rate under clip attribute. When you notice your footage takes a while to update when scrubbing through it, you should use proxies. You can generate proxies from your videos by simply right-clicking them and then choosing Generate Proxy Media. It also works when selecting multiple clips to generate multiple proxies at once. This process takes a while and the generated files can be pretty big. So inside the project settings, make sure to assign the location of your proxies on a drive where you have enough space. You can safely delete them at any time, but deleting them after you've completed your editing makes the most sense, so you don't have to regenerate them again. In the preview window, make sure you set it to Prefer Proxies, so it will actually use your proxies. First of all, there's a cut and an edit page in DaVinci Resolve, and I'm gonna be honest, I only use the editing page. First we will have to create a new timeline, and the easiest way to do so is by simply dragging something in this workspace. This will use the project settings we set up in the beginning, so it should already have the correct resolution and frame rate. If your footage comes with audio you don't need, like in this case, you can select a clip and press Ctrl-Alt-L to unlink the video and audio. Then click on an empty space to clear your selection, select the audio and hit backspace. Tracks in DaVinci work like layers and they automatically get recreated when dragging footage above the currently highest track. Sometimes this point can be hard to reach. In this case you simply right click the space and create a new track. This applies for both video and audio tracks. I usually add like 5 video tracks just in case. When you have a clip in your timeline, you can change its duration by hovering over the edges of your clip until your cursor becomes this icon. Then you can drag it around to change the duration. Using the blade tool, you can quite literally cut a clip and separate it into 2 clips. If you want to delete a clip, select it and hit backspace on your keyboard. If you would hit the delete key on your keyboard, you would also delete everything aligned vertically to this clip, and the remaining clips would automatically snap together. When you're managing clips, you will want them to snap to each other most of the time. For this, make sure you have the magnet enabled. To change the clip speed, you can do so by selecting it and expanding the speed settings in the inspector. There you can change your clip speed and even reverse them. With this icon you can freeze a frame. Your clip will be cut at the location your timeline marker is, and the separated clip will just be a still frame. In the timeline you can also press Ctrl-R and then change your clip speed by dragging your mouse. Just make sure your mouse turns into those 2 arrows. You can hit Ctrl-R again to make this header disappear again. To add transitions to your clips, you can find a lot of preset transitions in the effects panel. Click here to open and close the effects panel. To preview the transitions, you can hover over them and scrub through them. If you want to apply a transition, drag and drop them onto the beginning or the end of your clip, or drop them between 2 clips. So one clip will fade out and one will fade in with the selected transition. You can drag around the transition to change the duration of it. Depending on the preset you chose, you can click on the transition to get more options in the inspector. Using the effects panel, you can pick a lot of pre-animated text from the title section. Those are very easy to use for beginners and usually offer a good amount of customization in the inspector panel. For simple text, use the Text Plus effect. Using the inspector panel, you get a plain text with full customization control. Using the shading tab, you can create effects like outlines and drop shadows for the text. If you have customized your text and want to use it frequently in your project, you can drag and drop it into your media pool to save it as a preset. You can then drag the preset from your project into your timeline whenever you want to use that preset. When selecting a clip, you have a lot of options to transform it using the inspector. This includes scaling, positioning, rotation, and perspective tools. Alternatively, you can activate the transform tools in the preview by clicking this icon. This will let you move your clips around using your mouse. Dynamic zoom is a really useful option in DaVinci. You can activate it in the inspector and it will change the zoom factor of your clip from the beginning to the end of the clip. Using this icon in the preview, you can set a limit for the zoom factor. And using the inspector, you can change the direction of your zoom. Under the composite panel in your inspector, you can select several blend modes you may know from other programs. Using the opacity slider, you can alter the opacity or transparency of your clip. Using this diamond icon, you can set a keyframe onto the frame your timeline marker currently is at. So if you keyframe the zoom here and then set the zoom to 0 at the beginning of the clip, it will automatically create another keyframe there and you will have a scale-in animation. Using this icon on your clips, you can rearrange your keyframes. And with this icon, you can change the interpolation using animation curves. With those icons, you can add easing to the animation curves, which will add handles to the curves. This way you can drag them around to edit them further. Using the drop-down in the top left corner, you can cycle between different keyframeable values. I would advise beginners to stick to those curves at first. I will showcase a more advanced way to edit animation curves later in this video. Using the effects panel, you can find a lot of different effects you can drop on your clips. Effects include basic tools like glow, drop shadow, blur, and more. You can find most of them in the panel called effects and the panel called filters. If you go to the effects panel and navigate to the generators, you can select several presets you can use as backgrounds. There are simple ones like a solid color or more complex ones. Using the inspector, you can customize their appearance. If the more complex ones are too laggy in the preview, you can right click them and render them in place, but keep in mind that you can't change the settings afterwards. In Fusion, you have all the tools you need for compositing scenes and creating special effects. There's so much you can do in Fusion that I could probably make multiple hour-long videos on it, so I will stick to the basics here. Also, Fusion is node-based, so many beginners might get confused by it, but it's easier to use than it might appear at first. When you're in the edit page, you can right-click your clip and select Open in Fusion page, to make sure you have the right clip opened in Fusion. To add an effect in Fusion, you would have to add another node. You can do so by right-clicking and then browse the categories under Add Tool. Alternatively, you can press Shift Space to open a search bar to search for any node. Let's add a Gaussian blur node. You can connect it by using the mouse to create a connection from the input to the blur and then connecting the blur to the output. Just remember that yellow triangles mean input and gray squares mean output. Let's add keyframes to the strength of our blur. Opening the splines menu, you will get the editor for your animation curves. Those animation curves are easier to use and handle than the ones in the edit page. Sadly, you can't edit the keyframes from the edit page here. In Fusion, you can add masks everywhere you see a blue triangle. Let's add a polygon mask and connect the output of it into the mask input of our blur. The polygon mask has to be drawn first, and you can do so by simply clicking into your preview to add points. When clicking and dragging, you can create an interpolated path for your mask. This is like working with the pen tool in other softwares. Just make sure to close your mask by connecting your last point to your first point. In the color page of DaVinci Resolve, you can do your color grading. It will automatically open the currently selected clip. If you have used Proxies, make sure to set this viewer to prefer the originals, so you know what the colors will look like when exporting them. With the LUTs browser, you have a lot of preset options you can choose from. Using the bottom left corner, you can switch between several tabs to customize the temperature, tint, contrast, brightness, and also the colors of shadows, midtones, and highlights of your footage. Let's jump back to the edit page. I would recommend you to use each audio track for one purpose. For example, I always use the first track for my voice, the second track for background music, and additional tracks for sound effects. This has the advantage that if you open the mixer, you can easily change the loudness of an entire audio track, which is pretty useful for mastering your audio. In order to set different music files to the same loudness, right-click them and select Normalize audio levels. This way, their peak loudness will all be set to this value. Let's open the Fairlight page. Using the mixer on the right side, you can add effects to an entire audio track. Simply click this plus icon and select one of the effects. Many tutorials advise you to use a compressor on your voice, which will make sure your voice will have a more consistent loudness. In my opinion, you should be very careful with using a compressor, because it will distort your voice a bit and it may sound like you are inside the ear of your audience. So my advice would be to make sure you have the same distance to your microphone when recording instead. If you don't want to apply the effects to an entire track, you can open the effects panel and drag them onto your clips. This also works in the editing page. Sometimes it may happen that you insert a sound and it will only play on one side of your headphones. If this happens, go to the Fairlight page and navigate to the affected clip. Right-click it and choose Clip Attributes. Then set it from mono to stereo and make sure both channels use the same source, like this. To export your video, go to the Deliver page. On the left side, you have all the settings that matter. On the very top, you can choose several presets which are optimized for several different platforms, and I would advise you to use them. Make sure to put in a file name and set a location to a directory where you can easily find and access your video later on. Another tip of me is to check Normalize Audio and select Optimize to Standard. This way your audio will fit the standard of the platform you've selected. Be aware that Optimize to Standard will change the dynamics of your audio, which might lead to undesired sounds, so check your video again before uploading. If it doesn't sound right, choose Normalize to Standard instead. Finally, to render and export your video, click Add to Render Queue, and on the right panel it will appear in the render queue. By pressing Render All Jobs, the queue will be started and your video gets rendered.